How's that? Yes, I can hear myself almost better. I was just saying that this is book 10, not 9, but it's pretty minor. It's just, you sort of sweat over every book, so you got to remember them, how many there are. One morning in the life of fog. I, who have often imagined myself as an irrational number, I, who can disappear by closing my eyes, I would like to know the absolute value of anything, in case I am asked. In the curious hour before daylight breaks open, I walk into a bank of fog, where I can practice being a decimal point, a fraction of. I would like to know how a falling cloud feels on descent, briefly touching down onto the back of a swan asleep on a pond, beating on her feather gown, temporary, suspended between water and air, oxygen discarding, then calling back its hydrogens. Now lifting away, leaving below feathers, swan, pond, curve of blue. Kayla was just saying before we started that she was sort of shifting around her ideas of the order in whichever poem she was reading, and I realized that I had planned something and I actually started on the wrong poem because I'd shifted them around too many times. That's what happens when you mess around. Study in blue-gray. This starts in Cape Town in South Africa, where I've spent quite a bit of time working and vacationing, and goes and lives in Manhattan for a little while. I've seen you scramble through Union Square, slide sideways into the emergency happiness store. Under certain conditions, I might accompany you to your hotel. Do not even contemplate the princess costume. You should sashay out in your eye patch, sing the prelude to Always Crashing in the Same Car. When you spot a migratory terrapin attempting to cross Broadway at 39th, give it a hand. I seek the largest ripe peach from All Night Groceries, return with identical pairs of ballet shoes, overconfident in my Manhattan slang. Old grief in my dreams becomes splashes of blue-gray that scale the inner atrium wall of your hotel and intensify. That blue is the surface of the sky, peeling. This is a very associative poem, and it's hard for you to see because I'm seeing these 3 little lines here, and I'm going to try and sort of take a bigger breath so you can tell where I'm shifting from one to another, but I may not be entirely successful. So you'll just have to really listen for clues, which I can't tell you what they are. So you may be struggling more than I. After image. For a long time, she saw the after image. Flakes would drift across a particular scene, or wavering green-gray stripes would scroll up and down an empty wall. These things were both peripheral and embedded. A red cloud emanating as a blood orange was bitten into. In the maize field, her hair was lifted straight up, her blue dress down about her knees, one finger pointing toward the sky. Did the volcano erupt last night? A crow hops back and forth. It was the propane tank again. Violet-sided popo with a snow cone on top. It's feast or famine out there. What would she have made of this poinsettia tree, not belonging here, but aching to? Reservoir of water, reservoir of sky. The moon pulls across the water. The undifferentiated dark is all around us. Angels, too. Very tall with silvery wings, high as treetops. Feel the wind when they alight on the barn roof, shocking the bejesus out of the rooster. If they descend further onto the moonlight-slicked grass, not speaking in angel tongues, assessing us, how would you feel? Would you ever? Was she with you? Was that when she began her slide? Her words became feathered, or was that her arms? Did she thereafter aspire? Was her confidence set aside? Did you dream of their hair flickering? Are you circling the abyss? Was she? I am prepared to be extinguished by the night. Are you? The startle of popsicle red bougainvillea, banana leaf mural on an apartment building shadowed by a huge palm tree, listening to Una Noche en Villa Fontana, Hecho en Mexico. Time is squared. Everywhere is temporary. Hot light pouring through the bedroom memory. Hot light pouring through the bedroom window. Tell me your earliest memory. During the scant time between our births, me and my brother, both grandfathers died and one grandmother came to live with us, then 3 younger sisters. This being the order of external events, internal ones beyond our grasp. You know what families are like. Impossibly possible. There was an AI idea earlier, and this is actually from more like the 50s with the mechanical idea. So it's backwards instead of into the future. The transience of presence. The sky was clear and cold, though snow clouds were building to the east. Drifting from tree to tree in hiding, I was invisible to them. The mechanical squirrel placed in the treetops, unmoving below, the faux fox in waiting mode. The squirrel that appeared to worry, target of slingshots, nest a mess, trees struck by lightning more than once. Intent on feeding her kit-like kits, the fox high-stepped forward in velvet boots. The squirrel leapt higher, facsimile fur and rodent brain near perfect. I reduced my breathing, stood in shadow. Remarkably like a fox, the fox nose raised to overhead trail circled a fallen pine, snow in elaborate drifts. Near dusk, a perilous time when civilization pauses, easily undermined, animals extincted. Head first, the squirrel thing descended, scrabbling through ice for a cache. Along a frozen river, their crisscrossed prints ahead of me, I came to the scattered, once impeccable gadgetry and wiring. A scruffy gray overcoat, trampled and torn. A larger one nearby, golden red and gleaming. And I'll finish with a poem that's much more metaphorical. It's called Ironweed. And if probably most of you here on the West Coast don't know the weed, ironweed, which isn't really a weed, but anyway, it's a native plant to the Northeast. And it's usually about 3 meters high. It's absolutely mind-boggling. It's incredible. It has these huge, beautiful, dense purple flowers at the top of these long, skinny poles, basically. So it's a perfect thing for a metaphor. Ironweed. There is something in you of an iron-sided steamship, an architecture of unpliable stems, toothed leaves, a crow's nest of disc flowers, a pile of deep violet slippers uplifted on junkyard stilts, stiff-kneed, towering overhead as though dredged from some scrap iron seabed and winched roots first into place, overrunning meadows and pastures, obdurate perennials, late summer bloomers, witness to night-long astonishment as the Perseids brilliantine their long hair and flare, and the stars stutter, waking from a long dream of falling. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jen. What you didn't see as you were sitting down there was people going like this. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Kayla Czaga is the author of the poetry collections Midway, For Your Safety, Please Hold On, and Dunk Tank. Her work has been shortlisted for the Governor General's Award for Poetry and the BC and Yukon Book Prizes Dorothy Livesay Poetry Award. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi. Oh, this is great sound. Yeah, awesome mic. The series is lovely. I'm so glad I could take a Friday night off to be here. I'm going to be reading from Midway, my third book, which came out in May. It's a grief book. In late September 2017, my father died suddenly and unexpectedly. The hairbrush. A few days after he died, my mother found it in a drawer. Matted with white hair, it resembled an old man cactus that had been meditating for centuries in the desert, or a mostly eaten cone of cotton candy. From another angle, it was a giant cocoon at the end of a lacquered branch. Inside it, a butterfly had been knitting wings for 66 years. Under other circumstances, it might have been mistaken for a microphone, generating its own static. But there was nothing to say, no grand speeches to be made, because ultimately it looked like nothing as much as what it was, my dead father's hairbrush. Here, she said, handing it to me. Go grow yourself a new dad. I was living in Vancouver at this time and working at a bar some nights and also ghost writing different things, among them dinosaur erotica. And I wrote a poem about writing dinosaur erotica, which I read quite a few times because it had some jokes in it, and it was like my bit. And then I read it after this had happened, and it felt different. Another poem about dinosaurs. Recently, while reading my dinosaur erotica poem at a festival, I thought, is this it? Is this the life I wanted when I was a child? To grow up to tell the world's longest dinosaur dick joke to rooms full of strangers? Well, no, of course not. Though it's true I love dinosaurs and often visualized their bones deep below me in the earth wherever I walked, my thoughts were not sexual. Mostly I wanted to stop wearing those awful sweaters with applique hats and collars my mother brought home for me from Northern Reflections. I wanted, if I'm honest, to be smarter than anyone. I wanted a journal with a lock on it, but when I got one, I wrote in it only once, recording in my best third grade cursive, this book belongs to Kayla Czaga. Whenever I said something embarrassing, I wanted to switch schools or sail to Antarctica to study penguins slip and sliding on milky green ice. I wanted the precious Long John in the dozen, my own private Narnia, days of the week socks, and the indefinite cancellation of gym class. Every Friday, wearing Friday socks, I wanted to bring in the winning item to show and tell, to finally best Kevin King's Silkworm collection. So one Friday, I brought in the rock my father found in the dirt near Drumheller, an ancient shell curled up like a cinnamon bun, extracted it from my backpack and held it up so that the light would glimmer across its iridescent hull. But then no one said anything. No one cared about a thing so old and so dead they couldn't even tell what it was or had been. So now I'm telling you, hundreds of millions of years ago, that rock was a living thing, as was my father when he found it. That's my show and tell contribution. These thoughts and feelings may be extinct in me now, but I've written them down to prove they once lived. I messed with the order, Jen, and now I'm lost. Okay. Dear Brenda, in the bottle that washed up on the beach, instead of a note, I found my father's false teeth smashed into pieces, like pills for me to swallow. They fell from the bottle single file, shiny airplane passengers evacuating via the emergency slide, and I scattered them in the sand for seagulls to pick at, like popcorn kernels. The sky was gray, the sand was darker gray, the sea was darker still, with flecks of green between its teeth. I walked for a while and found a second bottle with a note in it intended for someone else. Dear Brenda, it began, so I stuffed it back into the bottle, back into sand. Seagulls heckled the mourning story performance. I found a fourth bottle, which was empty. Among a beach otter's garbled guts, I found a fifth bottle containing the otter's bladder, shriveled like a get-well-soon balloon. I chose not to mention the third bottle, whose note was meant for me alone. Oh God, I thought, will this beach go on forever? Bottle after bottle, some filled with sand, some with distant sighs we'll convince ourselves are the sea. One bottle coughed up enough change for me to catch a bus and ride as far away as I could want. I found a sixth and a seventh bottle. I found the jawbone of a baby whale. My fingers were getting cold. I thought of my note. now confetti for the crabs. It told me my dad was sorry for going away. I didn't believe it and vowed to find the note that proved otherwise, while the sea went on sucking lozenges, cooling her fevered head with salt water-filled beer bottles. I picked my way among piles of driftwood, which resembled the detritus of some great wreckage I knew would take me a very long time to sort through and reassemble. Small poem. The closest thing I have to a heritage is a photograph of my grandmother being fake arrested in a fake saloon in Arizona. 2 cowboy actors aim plastic pistols at her. She's laughing in the photo, my grandmother, in cowboy boots and a 10-gallon hat, her face thrown back to the rafters. When anyone says, I heard she shot her husband, her son's chorus, which one? 4'8", and she wielded every inch. In her left hand, she crumpled the word orphan like a napkin and belched into it. In her right hand, vodka and gifts. The colors of her flag are identical to the colors of flags from many other countries. The colors of her sweatpants are bargain bin bright. And the colors of her flag are, I'm going to count to 3, and no translation available, and go tie back your hair so I can see your beautiful face. The title of this next poem is a bit of an inside joke with myself because 80% of the poems I've ever written have been about my father. I have never written a poem about my father asleep on the toilet. I have never described him folded forward like an airplane safety car's illustration of brace position, or slumped against the tank with his head tipped back and dentures slipping off his gums. I have never confessed how much I wanted to wedge a finger into that dark gap between my father and his fake teeth, just to see what it would feel like. I could feel the cement under the carpet, though I've never written a poem about how my feet were cold for 17 years. I've never compared the polio vaccine scar on his shoulder to a carp's bloodless mouth, or claimed the freckles dotting his back were villages on a map of that dissolved Soviet state he came from. I've never recorded how it would happen at any time of day, especially in the afternoon, as daylight curled in his lap like a cat, and black sweatpants pooled around his ankles like a faulty portable hole to a dimension where this never happened. I've never admitted in a poem that the reason my father fell asleep on the toilet was because he'd worked graveyard shifts for so many years that regular sleep had died on him, and it was only zombie sleep he could have at that point, gobbling up his brains when he didn't see it coming. I probably don't need to explain that he worked these shifts for my mother and me so that we could eat and go shopping. I've never written about opening the bathroom door and seeing my father so still I believed for longer than a moment he had died, until his rib cage finally bloomed and I could breathe too. I've never described how similar and different it was to finding him in his bed and not realizing until after I had touched him that time he was really dead. And I've especially never written a poem about his fear when I woke him, or what he saw in those moments he stared before he could see me, when I could tell he wasn't seeing his daughter. A fear there are no pills for, a fear metaphors fail. My father braced for impact. And I'll just read one last poem. Thank you for listening so attentively, and hi everyone on Zoom as well. This is the title poem of the collection. It's called The Midway, and it is a villanelle, the Midway. Finally, there's a small bottle that will solve all my problems, my father thought. And he wasn't wrong. It's impossible to have problems when you're dead. Busted from decades of night shifts, his body was an obsolete mill in a shuttered boomtown. And finally, there was a small bottle a magician had conjured from behind my father's right ear, pills, like clown cars to carry him far from his problems. It was impossible for anything to be wrong with Ferris wheel pupils lifting him up, offering views of the river far beyond his failed industry. Finally, there was a small bottle my father could shoot at to win himself the softest top shelf prize, the hugest blue elephant. Impossibly for once, he had no problems, nothing wrong, no pain, no insomnia, no mortgage, no shame. The Midway had arrived for my father, so he could just drink. Finally, there was a small bottle, and not be wrong inside impossible problems.